I still don't have the proper audio and video set up, so I apologize, but I'm going to press forward anyways. This is Pod 4, Immortality and the Elite, Part 5. I'm Cameron, and this is the 5000, where I attempt to microanalyze life as a context of history. It's our responsibility to educate ourselves on how the world really works, so we can protect ourselves from what's coming. I hope to convince you that we are, in fact, losing our country and our freedom. If we want to keep them both, we have to petition the king, and the king is history. In this video podcast, I want to pose the question, does individual life really matter at all? Or is the only importance of our existence to see the advancement of human knowledge and invention? And of course, this is a rhetorical question, from my perspective at least. Human life matters as much as anything in our experience matters. Past, present, and future lives all matter. Yet for the elite, whose ideals and ambitions propel us into a brave new reality, is the question so rhetorical? When I consider what I've learned over many years of contemplating this question and compare it with much of the factual knowledge I've discovered and tried to retain and organize in my humble mind, I actually believe that it's not only not rhetorical for many of these quote-unquote pioneers, but is in fact dogma for them to elevate the importance of a fraction of humans over the rest. And while I personally acknowledge that there have been a relatively small percentage of the historical population that have accomplished a disproportionate amount of remarkable achievements, I also hold a very strong belief that not only have many of these achievements brought tremendous destruction, much of which is not debated, but the positive transformations that have emerged, in my opinion, are still highly subjective. And so I'll ask again, does your life matter? You tell me. So let's get into it. I'll start back with Ray Kurzweil, since he's the futurist that I've been focusing on. I'll continue to pick on him. And again, for what it's worth, Mr. Kurzweil may be a great guy. He may be really well intentioned. He may really believe that the current trajectory that our world's top scientists and inventors are on is what's best for humanity, and it will be what carries us into a more enlightened state of being. Mr. Kurzweil may be 100% genuine in his view that human beings have the capacity to create learning AI that will eventually become sentient and will ultimately possess the ability to gain all the knowledge of the universe and become the vehicles of human transcendence into the next evolutionary stage, into a fundamentally different state of being, at least a fundamentally different realization of that state of being. I'll remind you that Mr. Kurzweil is a very intelligent man. I personally struggle to follow the technical details he describes in his writings and in his talks, and I'm no match intellectually for him. I would appear foolish if I discussed science with Mr. Kurzweil. I would not impress any audience if I attempted to disprove his theories or his projections of technological milestones. Yet if you've listened to any of my other podcast videos, that you will know that I'm not worried about what I don't know. Instead, I'm grateful for what I don't know and my innate ability to observe and discern reality and to make decisions that will improve my chances of survival and hopefully my overall satisfaction with life. Now, I'm not worried about the things that I don't know. I'm humbled by them. And yet what I don't know is not what keeps me from learning. Only pride keeps us from learning. So that's where I focus my concern. So while many on this planet know a great deal more than I, including Mr. Kurzweil, none of them know what brings me joy in this world like I know of myself. None of them know how I perceive challenges in life and how I overcome those challenges. And none of them can tell me what it is that I value the most about my experiences as I go through them. In that I am the greatest source of my knowledge of me. The very same is true in all of us, which is, in my view, what gives us the ultimate authority over how we interpret what is best for our lives, and in turn, ultimate value in the same context. I hope you understand what I mean by this, because I say this with absolute humility and with good intent. Excuse me. It's important for us to recognize our own importance, so that we are able to recognize each other's. Now back to Mr. Kurzweil. I'll read some from his book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, which, by the way, if you have not gotten, I highly recommend. And again, it's technical, it's hard to follow, but it's important to understand the mindset of these futurists. He describes a process called recursion that is used to analyze a problem and predict all the possible outcomes. For example, the program is created to examine chess moves and consider all potential countermoves of an opponent. And he explains recursion in his book this way, Mr. Kurzweil. Recursion is a useful approach to generating all of the possible solutions to a problem, or in the context of a game such as chess, all of the possible move, countermove sequences. Key to the recursive formula, he continues, is pruning this huge tree of possibilities and ultimately stopping the recursive growth of the tree. In the game context, if a board looks hopeless for either side, the program can stop the expansion of the move, countermove tree from that point, called the terminal leaf of the tree, he says, and consider the most recently considered move to be a likely win or loss. He explains how the best chess computers, in his words, were gaining in chess ratings by 45 points a year, and the best humans were advancing closer to zero. He then used this data to predict the year a computer would beat the world chess champion, and he was late by 1 year. With this ability to learn so rapidly, imagine this in combination with the creation of an artificial human brain, or in the collaboration with an actual human brain. What I mean is in this next description from Spiritual Machines. It's lengthy. What I should have said is what I mean is described in this next description from the book Spiritual Machines. It's lengthy, but I want you to understand the concept. So here it is. In Kurzweil's words, the neural net paradigm is an attempt to emulate the computing structure of neurons in the human brain. Okay? We start with a set of inputs that represents a problem to be solved. For example, the input may be a set of pixels, representing an image that needs to be identified. These inputs are randomly wired to a layer of simulated neurons. Each of these simulated neurons can be simple computer programs that stimulate a model of a neuron in software, or they can be electronic implementations. Each point of the input, for example, each image, is randomly connected to the inputs of the first layer of simulated neurons. Each connection has an associated synaptic strength that represents the importance of this connection. These strengths are also set at random values. Each neuron adds up the signals coming into it. If the combined signal exceeds a threshold, then the neuron fires and sends a signal to its output connection. If the combined input signal does not exceed the threshold, then the neuron does not fire and its output is zero. Okay, so if you know anything about how our own neurological system works, and this is me talking again, the chemical reactions that take place to send signals to our brain are similar. So let me continue with the Spiritual Machines. Ray Kurzweil. The output of each neuron is randomly connected to the inputs of the neurons in the next layer. At the top layer, the output of one or more neurons, also randomly selected, provides the answer. A problem such as an image of a printed character to be identified is presented to the input layer, and the output neurons produce an answer. And the responses are remarkably accurate for a wide range of problems. Actually, he jokes, the answers are not accurate at all. Not at first anyways, he says. Initially, the output is completely random. What else would you expect, given the whole system is set up in a completely random fashion? And I left out an important step, Mr. Kurzweil adds, which is that the neural net needs to learn its subject matter. Okay? Now, again, back to me. Now, here's an important part I want you to consider while you're potentially fascinated with this lengthy explanation of how neural nets work. And there's my joke. He continues like this. This is the important part. Like the mammalian brains on which it is modeled, a neural net starts out ignorant. The neural net's teacher, which may be a human, a computer program, or perhaps another more mature neural net that has already learned its lessons, rewards the student neural net when it is right and punishes it when it's wrong. This feedback is used by the student neural net to adjust the strengths of each interneural connection. Connections that were consistent with the right answer are made stronger. Those that advocated a wrong answer are weakened. Over time, the neural net organizes itself to provide the right answers without coaching. Okay? So I'm sorry for the lengthy reading, but I could never have iterated that process clearly in my own words. Better to let you hear it directly from the author himself. But do you understand the vision here? Build machines that can do tasks. Build machines that can teach themselves to do tasks better. Build machines that learn like humans to do tasks. Build machines that can learn to think and act like humans and ultimately do both human-like thinking and acting better than we can. Okay, one of the most difficult obstacles to overcome, Mr. Kurzweil states, is teaching computers to recognize patterns as well as humans are able to. Patterns apparently are our specialty. Mr. Kurzweil says that we rely on pattern identification for most of our mental functions. To quote him, the human brain relies on pre-computing its analyses and storing them for future reference. We then use our pattern recognition capability to recognize a situation as comparable to one that we've thought about and then draw upon our previously considered conclusions. We're able to think about matters, we are unable to think about matters that we have not thought through many times before. Also, let me briefly describe what he says next. In order to make sense out of all the data that our brains are exposed to every second of the day, we have become very good at identifying the information that is most important and discarding the rest. Again, in Mr. Kurzweil's words, intelligence is precisely this process of selecting relevant information carefully so that it can skillfully and purposefully destroy the rest. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to think about. Imagine what we go through every day, all the data that we're exposed to, we are selecting what's important and discarding the rest. Okay, so I said consider this last statement in regards to our current exposure to media, social media, advertisements, and all the other visual and auditory pollution and bullshit that we encounter constantly. Now, if you're fortunate enough to live in a rural area, you're more likely to avoid a lot of these sensory toxins that we in the city are exposed to. And a lot of us, it's by choice what we're exposed to, but much of it is by circumstance. But it's worth contemplating how much that we're confusing our ability to process patterns and decipher the junk info from the intelligent info that we're processing every day. I liken it to rummaging through a landfill looking for something inspiring. You will probably discover some pretty interesting things in there, but after enough time up to your neck in garbage, your standard of what seems interesting may decline. You know what I mean? But what I want you to really focus on is with Mr. Kurzweil's optimism for building this world of human machines. He sounds like a proud parent describing how wonderful his child will grow up to be. His knowledge of math, science, and technological design are profound, and his predictions have more often than not been accurate, so I think we should pay attention to him. And you should also take into consideration that everything I'm reading to you was written by 1999, so much of the technology has progressed well beyond anything I'm bringing to light here. Mr. Kurzweil's cutting edge and is driving change in the world. He's a visionary, and like many visionaries, he sees things that many don't. But likewise, like all visionaries who have come before him, he cannot see what the world will be like as a result of what he's bringing into it. Some will benefit us and some will not. But unfortunately, I fear what Ray Kurzweil wants to bring to our world will ultimately end us. It will, in relatively short time, replace us. And I'm not talking about how robots will take our jobs, because I honestly don't believe that would be a problem. I think that if we made machines to do tasks, we would always need humans to manage. New opportunities would arise for humans to do work or explore different ways of living, but humans would remain in control and we would remain human. Ray Kurzweil and the like are building machines to replace humans, whether they realize it or not. But I think they do. In Mr. Kurzweil's case, I don't believe he has nefarious motives. I believe he has a vision of the world that sees this as a natural evolution and a process that will benefit humans even if we become unrecognizable in the future to our current form. I don't doubt Mr. Kurzweil's sincerity of belief in the world he envisions. I just doubt what my satisfaction will be with living in it after it overtakes the reality that I prefer. I've been making these video podcasts under the overarching theme of immortality and the elite. I said in a previous video that intelligence was not enough to make the world a better place. We also need compassion. It has been a recurring theme throughout history that certain people have forced their vision of the world and reality onto others. Empires have been built in this way, and technology has advanced because of such curiosity and ambition. Civilizations have been destroyed, and cultural genocide is still occurring today, even in our country. If we are citizens of the United States, in my opinion, and if we don't mourn what's happened to the native peoples of our land, and if we don't feel compelled to educate ourselves on the history of native cultures and their current struggle with freedom, prosperity, identity, and recognition as sovereigns, then we'll never understand how a similar occurrence happened to our agrarian way of life. The same progress will destroy our rural communities more and more, and well intentioned environmentalists will fail to see that the progress that they so love is the very thing that is destroying the spirit of this world and the balance of the earth itself. And I don't mean to disparage environmentalists, the general purpose is good. It's just most environmentalists don't seem to understand that true environmentalism would resemble a world more similar to how primitive people lived in it. But that's another topic for another day. Similarly, as Americans, if we don't mourn and educate ourselves of the history and condition of black folks in this country, we'll miss an opportunity to understand how we all are the same in this fight to retain our humanity. None will be excluded in this forced transformation into the quote unquote new age. None will be overlooked as the condition of slavery increases around us. And once our dependence becomes indistinguishable, we will, which I believe we're close, the key will turn inside the lock, and the door to humanity will be closed forever. And we could argue over the fundamental quest for progress that seems to be inescapable within the nature of some humans, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. We could debate until our deaths if one invention or the other, or one conqueror or the other, was overall benefit or harm to humanity. But I believe there is something fundamentally different about where we are now in our discoveries and what the effects will be upon their future introduction into the world. I believe we are already seeing the effects now. The deterioration of our minds has accelerated as the minds of the machines are expanding exponentially. We are losing control, and we don't even recognize it. The desire for utopia and eternal life has captured the focus of a man like Ray Kurzweil, and he is far from alone. Yet all the while, most of us have no idea who he is or what others like him are working to construct. They are building a world that increasingly will operate irrespective of our participation with it. The machines they are raising, pun intended, will be capable of imitating human behavior, if not learning it entirely authentically. They will know immeasurably more about the universe than all humans combined, and they will be capable of policing us, judging us, and eliminating us if they so choose. Now, I promise you, while immortality is the dream of Ray Kurzweil, it will in fact be the reality for the machines. There will be no merger with machines for long, because men like Ray Kurzweil will never be able to stop there. Men like Ray Kurzweil never stop, because they believe they can do more. And every time they do more, another reality emerges, as many more are lost to history.